Now, some Republicans believe Musk's criticism encouraged even more House GOP members to abandon ship. Musk, who has been charged with cutting government spending, wrote on X that the spending bill, quote, shall not pass.
The amount of spending over that reasonable baseline represents 8 point.
We pay more interest than the cost of the entire U.S. military. All of it.
This is to show you and the American people that Republicans have a plan to realize and to make sure that not only President Trump's mandate, but America's wishes are fulfilled.
Congress trying to cram through another one right during Christmas, as they usually do. And the president is not happy about it. Trump posted this along with Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Says, the most foolish and inept thing ever done by congressional Republicans was allowing our country to hit the debt ceiling in 2025. It was a mistake and now is something that must be addressed. Now, meanwhile, Congress is considering a spending bill that would give sweetheart provisions to government censors and for Liz Cheney. The bill would make it easier to hide the records of the corrupt J6 committee, which attempted and accomplished nothing for the American people and hid security failures that happened on that day. This bill would also give Congress a pay increase while many Americans are struggling this Christmas. Now, increasing the debt ceiling is not great, but we'd rather do it on Biden's watch. If Democrats won't cooperate on the debt ceiling now, what makes anyone think that they would do it in June during our administration? Let's have this debate now, and we should pass a streamlined spending bill that doesn't give Chuck Schumer and the Democrats everything they want. Republicans want to support our farmers, pay for disaster relief, and set our country up for success in 2025. The only way to do that is with a temporary funding bill without Democrat giveaways, combined with an increase in the debt ceiling. Anything else is a betrayal of our country. From the president and J.D. Vance speaking together. And that continues on, saying on X, increasing the debt ceiling is not great. Republicans must get smart and they must get tough. If Democrats threaten to shut down the government unless we give them everything they want, then called their bluff. It is Schumer and Biden who are holding up aid to our farmers and disaster relief. This chaos would not be happening if we had a real president, which we will, in 32 days. From President Trump. Nice statement posted here by J.D. Vance. So what does that mean? What are the Republicans going to do? Are they going to play ball? Well, maybe. Johnson weighs spending plan B. Now, there was a big stack of disgusting bills that they were going to try to pass through, and now Johnson is saying he might reverse on this. Speaker Mike Johnson and his leadership team is quietly discussing a plan B to fund the government amid conservative opposition and vocal criticism from incoming President Trump top ally Elon Musk. Oh man, Elon has entered the game. The Louisiana Republican is discussing dropping $100 billion in disaster aid plus other attachments and instead passing, quote, a clean CR, then dealing with the other issues in the new year, according to two Republicans. Now, in addition to the disaster aid, that would mean dropping $30 billion for farmers and a one-year extension of the farm bill, among other items, at least for now. Johnson has not made a final decision, but if he shifts strategies, it would be a boon for his right flank, which has railed publicly against the current spending bill and received a dormant threat to Johnson's speakership. Many of those conservatives don't typically support stopgap spending bills. Most of the additions to the bill were designed to appease other Republicans as well as Democrats. Now, some Republicans believe Musk's criticism encouraged even more House GOP members to abandon ship. Musk, who has been charged with cutting government spending, wrote on X that the spending bill, quote, shall not pass. He says should, but I was doing the Lord of the Rings thing. And that any lawmaker who votes for it deserves to be voted out in 2 years, and maybe they will. I think it's having an effect on some people, said Andy Biggs. Asked if Musk's tweets were moving votes, he says, yeah, I think it probably is. So Musk's decision to weigh in has frustrated some Republicans who have long viewed him as an ally. They're like, stay out of our business, Elon. You make us have to do things. They don't want to do these things. Like, crap, Elon's here. It's like dad's home. You know when you have a substitute teacher, you can get away with anything, and then the real teacher comes back, and you're like, oh crap, you're gonna like look at our papers again. Yeah, Elon's home. The GOP doesn't control all the levers of power until next year, and of course, therefore, is limited in its ability to write spending bills that the party favors. Some Republicans are already privately grumbling that Musk, while clearly a successful businessman, doesn't understand the ways of Washington, where spending bills must be bipartisan. Democrats would be less likely to lend their votes on a stopgap funding bill if their hard-won concessions like disaster aid, funding to repair the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and other provisions fell out of the package, but some purple district Democrats might feel pressure to vote for the package to keep the lights on. Johnson said, I was communicating with Elon. Elon, Vivek, and I were in a text chain, so they're all in a group text like we are, and I was explaining to them the background of this. And Vivek and I talked last night about almost midnight, and he said, look, I get it. We understand you're in an impossible position, Mike. Everyone knows that. Now, of course, Johnson's spending plan was giving him heartburn before Musk even weighed in. Conservatives were always going to have a problem with increased spending. Tim Burchett said, look, I welcome the Elon fight. I've been doing this a long time. I spoke out against it yesterday. Switching to a clean spending bill won't totally solve Johnson's problems. He'll still need help from Democrats to even pass a clean bill. Some conservatives still won't vote for it, even without the add-ons. But the current spending plan is sparking widespread opposition from dozens of Republicans, including some typical Johnson allies. There was open skepticism among Republicans that Johnson would be able to get a majority for spending, but that would put him on shaky ground moving into January 3rd when there's going to be a new speaker race. Several others said that they are committed to backing Johnson, who can't become speaker if he gets more than one GOP no vote early next month. And so will that happen? We will see. But as we saw, Trump is not interested in having this thing passed. Here is another excerpt on that from Fox Business, where they were talking about this.
In the last couple of minutes, Donald Trump has told Fox News he is, quote, totally against the proposed continuing resolution bill that has just been floated by Congress. And a lot of people haven't had a chance to read it. It's more than 1,700 pages. But that spending bill is not sitting well with the president-elect. Again, please keep in mind that the House is controlled by Republicans. So this is engendering a lot of Sturm und Drang at the moment. And considering we do see a big drop here, we do see the NASDAQ down 648 points, S&P down 163. So maybe not entirely driven by the Federal Reserve saying the economy is strong, so only 2 rate cuts next year versus 4. Joining me now with 4-point couple of...
So stock market obviously shifting today. I think there was some rationale for that being related to the Fed, who also spoke today, so that might be another reason. But Chip Roy also was speaking about this. You know him. Says the House GOP should vote no on this, okay? This is the Krampus Christmas Cramnibus. Sounds like a lump of coal. Does it come with a gift receipt? We don't want it. It's a 1,547-page, quote, Christmas bill. Violates House rule requiring at least 72 hours, to actually read the bill, which they don't want anybody to read. Stops automatic spending cuts that are required by law. Drives up the deficit by spending $110 billion on unpaid for disaster-related spending. Includes a massive healthcare package that is paid for with budget gimmicks. Extends the State Department's Global Engagement Center. Oh, that's cool. What is that? That is working to suppress free speech online. Reauthorizes the Second Chance Act, which provides services to violent criminals. Harms refineries by allowing year-round sale of 15% ethanol gasoline. Provides billions in extra funding to fund the Job Corps, a failed scandal federal jobs program. Authorizes millions of migrant and seasonal farm workers to give jobs to foreigners. Creates a multi-million-dollar EPA pilot program to make recycling, which is fake, even more accessible. So here's Chip Roy. He came out and was talking about what a joke this whole thing is.
The conference needs to decide whether we're actually serious about spending. They talk about, well, got to do mandatory spending reform and bend the curve. But we just voted on a $200 billion shift of dollars in Social Security that's going to shorten the time when Social Security expires or goes bankrupt. We're just fundamentally unserious about spending. And as long as you got a blank check, you can't shrink government. If you can't shrink government, you can't live free.
All right, shout out to Chip Roy. Now, this happens every time, okay? It's constant. They are just repeatedly violating what they say that they'll do the next time, and then the next time comes around, and they just do what they promised they would never do again, right? It's always, we have to this time. This is it. Just vote this one time, and we will never do it again. We fast forward, they do it again every time. We're sick of it. But the Republicans were out. They were speaking on this today, this morning. Actually, I think it was this afternoon, not long ago, talking about Trump's first 100 days. Here's what the Republicans had to say.
We came together today because
Senators.
we want to get something accomplished.
Let's
Look
see.
at the group of people up here, and we are here because we're for things. We're here because we want to get something, make something happen up here. In my case, I've been here 6 years. It's been pretty frustrating to try to get things accomplished. Trump had a mandate. I just went through by-election, and I can just tell you what people are talking about, why they're voting for Donald Trump, and why they voted for Republicans. Number one, they want a secure border. They're fed up. They're fed up with drugs. They're fed up with criminals. They're fed up with terrorists coming across the border. They're fed up with having an open border. Number two, they're fed up with inflation. Now, they probably haven't tied inflation enough to government spending, but to the certain extent they are, and they're expecting Republicans to stop inflation. However we can do it, that's what their expectation is. So we came together to try to come up with how do we get something positive done. Number one, there ought to be probably a two-step process because it's going to take a while to do the things we have to do, extending the Trump tax cuts. So what should we do first? The American public wants right now a secure border. Now, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of resources. Wouldn't have taken if the border had never been open.
Well, they're selling the wall now.
When Donald Trump, when I came up here 6 years ago, when government was shut down, if the Democrats had funded what Donald Trump wanted on the border. But now it does. So what do we need? We need money for more Border Patrol agents. We need more money for ICE agents to do the deportations. We need to have have money for the wall, money for vessels, money for technology.
Money.
Just as an example, what is Biden
Just
doing?
cut
by
other
selling off
things,
steel that
and
we
then
could
you'll
use?
have that money.
It's a
Like,
slap
stop
in the
spending
face
money
of the
on your
American public.
$2,000 hammers and just spend that
That's
money
number
towards
one.
the border.
We've got to get that done. We've talked to Senator Graham. He'll be the chair of the Budget Committee, and he is absolutely committed to having
Lindsey Graham.
a border bill done quickly.
We're going to give so much money to
that
Ukraine.
Donald Trump
It's going
can
to be sick.
sign, and we'll get the border secure. Now, the second bill, there's going to be a lot of things we all want to get accomplished. Number one, we've got to extend the Trump tax cuts. And there's probably a lot of things we can do to improve the tax policy of this country. Do what we should be doing. Our tax policy should be doing, how do we make sure we fund our government, but how do we do it in a manner that we create jobs, don't destroy jobs? So there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And I know Senator Johnson and Senator Lee were both involved in that process a few years ago. In our letter, we say we ought to look at least $2.5 trillion worth of savings. Reality is the numbers are going to have to be bigger than that. Let's think about the numbers. We've had a 2% increase in population in the last 5 years, 53% increase in funding. Joe Biden's been president 1.6% of the history of this country. He's responsible for 23% of the entire federal debt. I've been up here 6 years. We've doubled the federal debt from 18 to $36 trillion. This is a problem. Inflation will not go away. Interest rates are not going to come down until we figure out how to start saving money. I know on the House side, the House Budget Committee has significant opportunities for savings, and I know that all of us are going to work diligently to find every dollar of savings we can to make sure we take care of the American public, but also we save money.
All right,
so
we'll
let me
see.
turn it over to the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, Andy Harris.
Thank you very much, Senator Scott. Look, the president won a mandate on November 5th, and the mandate, just as the senator said, was to deliver on the economy and deliver on the border. The bottom line is that what Congress needs to show the American people that we are 100% behind the president's mandate and the president's policy, and the letter indicates how we think it needs to be done. We do know that extending the tax cuts is incredibly important, but will require some hard decisions to be made on spending reductions in order to control the deficit. But the first thing we need to do coming out of the box is we need to pass an emergency border bill. It has to be passed, obviously, because we don't expect any help from our Democrat colleagues. Well, they're spending their time selling off border wall. We're going to have to actually pass a bill that makes us buy back border wall or buy new border wall because it's being sold off, in addition to all the things Senator Scott said. So we need to go ahead on a bicameral basis. The Republicans need to show we are behind this agenda. We need to deliver on a border bill as soon as we can because the American people expect it, and then we need to immediately
It better
turn our
be a better
attention
border
to
bill than the
improving
last one that
economy
came out of the
by
crap
making
Senate
sure
with
that
Langford from
the
Oklahoma.
average
It was the
American does
worst
not
thing
get
we
a
ever
tax
saw.
increase, that we deliver on
So
some of
this
the
guy's from the
president's
Freedom
promises
Caucus, so
like
hopefully
tax
that's
on
better.
tips, and that we control the growth of the federal budget and therefore decrease the federal deficit. So again, this is going to be a bicameral effort. We are fully in support of what the president's agenda is, and this letter indicates how we think Congress ought to proceed.
In returning President Trump to the White House, the American people could not have been more clear. They want operational control over the border again. They want our country to not be under invasion anymore. They want border security. Our reconciliation proposal today keeps the promise made for Americans. We're going to deliver real border security right up front and no more kicking the can down the road. And a vital part of that first reconciliation package, which will include border security, we've got a fantastic way of paying for it, of offsetting it through an appropriate mechanism that is tied to our lack of border security. My legislation that will be used as part of the pay for is called the America First Act. What the America First Act does is to get the federal government to stop subsidizing illegal immigration, stop giving federal welfare benefits and other advantages that are supposed to go to U.S. citizens and not to illegal aliens. We can keep them out of the hands of those who aren't supposed to be here in the first place. We'll save an enormous amount of money. I mean, we're talking about $100 billion, possibly significantly more than that, depending on exactly how the score turns out. For years, we as Americans have been told that we don't need to worry about one thing in particular when there's illegal immigration happening. Don't worry, they're not getting welfare benefits. They're not eligible for them. Well, there are some problems with that. One of the many problems with it, under this administration in particular, is that there are millions of people who have come in here and then have been papered over as if they were legal when in fact they are not, through, among other things, the illegal, unlawful use of technique known as immigration parole. Immigration parole is there to be used for humanitarian or...
Now, I know these are senators and their job is to sit around and beg for more money, although this is a representative. This is Andy Biggs from Arizona. Ron Johnson, big fans of Ron Johnson. Let's listen to Ron, see what he had to say about all this.
We are a bicameral group of people who want to be part of the solution, who vote no most of the time, but we want to vote yes. I don't think Senator Rick Scott or this group has been given near enough credit for, first of all, the tenacity of Senator Scott holding a weekly dinner where we talked about the debt ceiling. None of us had ever voted for an increase in the debt ceiling.
Where was that dinner at?
We talked for week
Ruth's
after
Chris?
week after week.
Government credit cards?
Finally realized, well, the only way we're going to get
We have a
something
weekly
for
dinner.
an increase in the
All
debt
you can
ceiling
eat.
is if
Talk
we
about
were to support
inflation.
something. So it was the Freedom Caucus that actually had the bill, and then very reasonable negotiation with their other House members to propose something that unfortunately Speaker McCarthy kind of frittered away that proposal. But anyway, we are here about solutions, and that is why we want to be very public public that we support the two reconciliation bill solutions, starting out with a very rapid passage of something that provides President Trump the resources he needs to honor the promise he made to Americans, that the Americans support overwhelming margins to secure our border. But also being the accountant of this group, I have to provide a chart. Senator Scott talked about the fact that our population since 2019 has increased 2%, but spending is up over 50%. And this chart basically represents that. But I think what's notable about this, I put a baseline. If we would have grown our spending by a reasonable baseline of population growth, even with high Biden inflation, we would have gone from about $4.4 trillion in spending in 2019, and instead of spending almost $7 trillion this last fiscal year, we would have been spending about 5.7. The difference of spending above that reasonable baseline, and again, how can anybody dispute that it'd be reasonable to grow federal spending by population growth plus inflation?
And look at this chart. You can see now the interest, fiscal year 2025, the interest actually happened in 2024 too. The interest on the debt was more than our defense spending. Look, 889 in interest of this year, fiscal year 24 versus I want to say that's 884. So defense spending was 884 billion. Interest was 889 billion. Now this year, it's going to be almost $1 trillion in interest. So 966 billion and 900 billion for defense. That's it. So you can see we're just bleeding ourselves out. Medicare, Medicaid, trillions of dollars go to that. Other mandatory spending, trillions of dollars. And they're going to try to pass another one.
We're at $36 trillion in debt. The amount of spending over that reasonable baseline represents We
pay more interest than the cost of the entire U.S. military. All of it.
$8 trillion. We further mortgage our children's future. One final note. One of the techniques of the Uniparty in massively increasing spending is they transfer discretionary spending into mandatory. I think that's, again, it's off budget. We don't appropriate that. It's just spending occurs automatically. But most people when they hear mandatory spending think of Social Security. They think of Medicare or even Medicaid. The reality is because of the actions of the Uniparty, since 2019, we've increased other mandatory spending. And not Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid by about the same amount as we increased those three programs. Those programs have increased about $700 billion. Other mandatory spending has increased by $680 billion per year.
Oh, so gross.
Again, off the books. You can't touch it.
So
other
gross.
than reconciliation. And so when Senator Scott talks about $2.5 trillion as being a minimum level that we need to cut spending in our reconciliation package, I'm saying we've got about a $6.8 trillion pool of 10-year money that we should be evaluating for dramatically reducing the size and scope of government. Because when government grows, our freedoms necessarily recede. And I say that's the other value we all hold. We think government is here to jealously guard our freedom, not cause and exacerbate more problems and mortgage our children's future.
They're supposed
I'm happy to turn it over to Congressman Ralph Norman.
All right, so that was Johnson. Let's see if there's anybody else who's... we've got Clay Higgins, I believe, coming in.
Today, the most conservative members of the House and the Senate, and we are together to support a two-step reconciliation strategy. America must understand that reconciliation as a process is a unique opportunity to avoid the Senate's filibuster during the annual congressional budget process. This is our opportunity to reset our spending, to change the trajectory of spending, to reflect the priorities of the American people, and to advance conservative policy wins. President Trump was resoundingly elected by the American people. And the incoming administration must be provided with the proper resources to accomplish real change beginning in January. The American people clearly demand that we stop the arterial bleed at our border and finally build the wall and develop the assets necessary, funding the necessary manpower to enforce the laws that we already have on the books. We understand that necessary tax simplification and reform will come later to ensure that the cost of living for working families is reduced. Promises made, promises kept was a constant and admired theme of the first Trump administration. With this plan, we'll set up President Trump to do it again from day one in his next term.
First of all, credit goes to Rick, Mike, Ron, the senators that stand on the front line, of course, our chairman, Freedom Caucus, Andy Harris. This is to show you and the American people that Republicans have a plan to realize and to make sure that not only President Trump's mandate, but America's wishes are fulfilled and that they can be fulfilled quickly and completely. And so we're set on getting the border stuff done almost immediately, and it's going to be paid for correctly. And then we'll move on to
Mexico?
the probably more complicated issue of making sure that people don't have to pay more in taxes than they should, and they don't have to pay more for the goods and services that they currently can't afford under a Biden administration. But the point is this plan has been put together with the great people up on this stage and others, but mostly led by Senator Scott Scott and Andy Harris and Republicans have a plan to make sure that President Trump's mandate, America's wishes, are fulfilled. Thank you all.
All right, let's take some questions and then we'll...
The CR was brought up a few times. We'll start there. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, even some senators are now posting on X saying that they should not take up this bill. The House, it sounds like, could vote on it today. You all don't usually vote for CRs. So what is your message to Speaker Johnson, and why do you think he put a product up like this out there?
Over 1,500 pages, all right? The bills that never seen the light of day. None of us knew what was in them. People are expected to vote on very quickly. You know, more regulation. I mean, just wasteful spending. No pay-fors, right? It makes no sense. You know, we won the election. This has got to change. You know, people act like, oh, you can't balance the budget. So I balanced the budget. When I was governor, I walked in a budget deficit. You do it by looking at everything you spend money on, look at every line in the budget, look at all the regulations. You can cut 20% of regulations. I'm very appreciative of what Elon Musk is doing and Vivek Ramaswamy because we can do it. It's all doable.
Let me just comment. Look, the American people don't send their representatives to Washington to vote on a 1,500-page bill in less than 24 hours that spends $110 billion.
It's gross.
$110 billion to the deficit without the opportunity to offer an amendment to perhaps pay for this bill. The process is broken. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk recognize that if they are empowered to somehow reduce government spending and reduce our deficit, because as Elon Musk says, deficit equals inflation. That's the bottom line. When we do deficit spending, we're printing money, we are causing inflation. How are we going to change that if one of the actions we take after November 5th is to take a vote on a bill that's $110 billion, direct addition to our deficit and our debt without even a vote on a pay-for? We have to change the way business is done in Washington. Unfortunately, it does look like we're probably going to vote on this today. I don't know. They're whipping the votes over in the House to see if they have the votes to pass this. I think most Americans would view this as exactly what they think is wrong with Washington.
Do you have confidence in Speaker Johnson staying on then?
I don't know. I'm only one vote out of 220. Look, I think the Speaker could have handled this differently. At this point, I'm still supportive of the Speaker, but I will tell you that voices both inside the House Freedom Caucus and outside the Freedom Caucus have been very disappointed at what's happened this week.
Interesting.
Anybody else want to say anything about the CR?
I'll just quickly say it's like Chairman Harris said, it's the way it was done. Not going through a rule, not letting us vote individually. And guess what was hidden in there? And I'm still livid about this. Pay raises for us.
For you.
How does that square?
More
What
money for
return on
Congress?
investment have we given the people of America other than $37 trillion in debt? It makes no sense.
It's
And
crazy.
have no pay for us? How does that work? No family or business would do that. And no family or business, as has been mentioned, how do you, a speed reader can't read 1,547 pages in less than 24 hours? It's insanity. Now, the next question is, what are you going to do? Friday at 12 o'clock, the budget. I mean, that's when the shutdown. Well, look, it is what it is. And we got to face it. But rather than saddle each one of you young people with more and more debt, it's insanity. And that's,
Right.
it flies in the face of the Doge Commission. That's what everybody's excited about. Yet
Exactly.
when we do this, makes no sense.
Exactly. And they keep saying if they shut it down, that's going to cause more problems for everybody. And I don't know who that's going to cause problems for. I mean, people are facing problems because of the inflation. Elon himself has explained inflation comes from government spending. When you've got $1 trillion in interest that you're dumping out every year and other mandatory spending, and then you dump on more spending on top of that, that's where the inflation comes from. So the shutdown, if it stops the spending, it will stop or lessen the increase of inflation, which is what we want. That is the solution. So stop the spending.
We need to realize that since November the 5th, since we got this mandate for President Trump, the House, if we pass this bill with $110 billion, we will have passed more than $300 billion in additional spending since November the 5th. That's the trajectory we have got to stop.
The way you ought to look at what's going to happen in 26 is a massive automatic tax increase. I think most Republicans will do everything we can to avoid a massive $4 trillion plus tax increase.
What?
From my standpoint, as we do that, I think somebody else mentioned simplification. I'd like to simplify and rationalize the tax code. That's going to take a longer period of time. You know, there's some people arguing, well, you have to combine border security with that in order to get it passed. I think there's a great deal of pressure right there preventing that massive tax increase on the American economy. That would be completely counterproductive. It'd be actually, in the end, increase deficits because it'll do so much economic harm. So again, avoiding a massive tax increase is what
$4 trillion automatic.
once we get past securing the border. What we do right now with spending policy that ends is we extend that policy based on current policy. It's only tax policy that ends. So again, everything in the way our rules are written favors increasing spending and disfavors tax cuts. So we're just going to equalize that treatment. If we treat spending policies that end and we're going to extend those based on current policy, so there's no score to doing that. There shouldn't be a score when we just continue current tax policy and prevent a massive tax increase. So again, we're just trying to equalize that treatment. It's totally within the jurisdiction of the Budget Committee. I serve it. I think Chairman Graham hopefully will be supportive of that as well. It just makes common sense.
Lindsey Graham. All right, look, I'm hopeful that they deliver. We're going to be positive and optimistic here and hope that they deliver. But if it's just going to be we need more money and more bills and stuff like that, and I guess that's all they can deliver as the Senate. They better not squander this, man. We have a once-in-a-life opportunity, and if they're going to come back with a Senator Langford crap bill for the border or some other disgusting bill, we're not going to be happy about it. So we'll see what happens with spending. The clock is ticking on this. Trump and J.D. Vance have made their position known. Time to stop the spending. Stop giving the Democrats endless gobs of money. You've got to cut it off at that level, right? If the idea is you want to stop the actors from doing the bad things, yes, you can go and you can fight on the game field with the actors, those people who are playing the game, or you can go also and take away the money who is funding the players, which is exactly what the Republicans should do, because the Democrats have been absconding and ransacking the Treasury for their own gains. My friends, we'll keep our eye on the spending. We'll keep our eye on the Senate and Congress. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do.